Welcome to the Women's Sanctuary, the podcast about tending the soul of women, sisterhood, and the rise of the sacred feminine. I'm your host, Arlia Hoffman. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Arlia. I'm thrilled today, again, to not be alone at the microphone. I am joined by a lovely person that I've known for a little while, and I'm excited to introduce you to, because she's got a lot to say, a lot of great things to share, and I think you'll find this conversation fascinating. Her name is Stacey Ruth, and she is unstoppable. She has founded 2 multimillion-dollar agencies and has been among the top 50 entrepreneurs under 50 here in Atlanta, and twice awarded top 100 IT agencies by Experiential Marketer. As a novice entrepreneur, she made nearly every business decision mistake. I think we can all relate, even as she was doing things the way things are, quote, supposed to be done. Her businesses survived personal challenges, the fallout of 9/11, deep recessions, as she learned how to tap into her own inner wisdom to make faster, more accurate decisions in order to thrive. Today, she coaches other women CEOs and executives on how to grow their influence and impact with bold confidence and clarity. She's the author of Own Your Own Self. She's the author of Own Your Own Shift. And her latest book, which we're going to be talking about, Inside Out Smart, is about to come out. It will be available April 19th, 2022. Stacey Ruth, welcome to the Women's Sanctuary.
I am so excited. I love the work that you're doing, and I can't wait to talk about how all of this connects.
Me too. I think, you and I realized early on that we both have similarities in this ability to bridge kind of this inner world and the outer world. You are very, well established in the business and leadership arena. And clearly you have done an exceptional job of bringing that inner awareness to, the leadership realm, executive leadership, and the business realm. And then also, you and I have this common design eye for how in business we call it, branding, but it's also
right.
how do you show up in the world?
Well, right, but that's a personal brand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, let's start with your new book.
Okay.
It's called Inside Out Smart. What's it about?
Yes. Well, it's really funny because it's exactly about what you were talking about, which is that bridging of the inner and the outer, if you will. And I love that, this is a women's sanctuary because it's really bridging our own inner masculine and feminine, our rational and our intuitive, our IQ and our EQ, our left and our right brain, all of these parts of us that we all have. It's not about women have intuition and men don't, right? It's not about creatives or left brain or right brain, it's all about being able to create that connectivity between our conscious and our unconscious, between our rational and our intuitive, so that we're really using our brains the way they're meant to be used. I don't know if you've heard that. I grew up with this. We only use about 10% of our brain, right? Or 5% of our brain. It varied what people said. That's absolutely false. We are thinking all the time.
It's just that.
Right. Absolutely. But 95% of it is unconscious. And we make decisions, 10 big decisions, not the habitual ones, but, major decisions we make 10 seconds before we're even consciously aware of it. And all those decisions are emotional. And I mean, that's what the neuroscience says about it. So what I'm doing in this book is helping people understand where their biases and their fears bump up against their intuition, how to recognize it, how to tap into it, and then how to rationally leverage it into action rather than treating it like some sort of woo-woo voodoo that I don't know if I trust it or not.
Well, that makes sense because if you don't understand what's going on behind the eyes or behind the
Yeah.
scenes,
Yeah.
um,
Just under the surface. Yeah.
yeah, you can totally attribute it, make up any story you want to attribute it to what is actually happening and not to discount the spiritual side of life. But that self-awareness is everything. It gives you more power.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because a lot of men and a lot of women in male dominated fields, like say doctors, engineers, attorneys, they've been having to show up in this hyper rational world that we've kind of created. And we actually have created it in the human history relatively recently, but we forgot that we actually created it, right? Women tend to push aside, and men executives tend to push aside intuition where they feel like they can't trust it, when in fact it's making faster, more accurate decisions when data is missing. And so you're missing the ability to make effective decisions by discounting one of your most powerful and actually largest decision-making tools.
Okay, so let's back up a moment. How would you define intuition?
Well, it's really a fascinating. It's the knowing without knowing how you know. All right. It's simply to know. And it's not emotional because we say, oh, I've got a gut feeling. So we say emotion, feeling, right? But it actually has no emotion attached to it. It's not afraid. It's not anxious. It's not excited. It's not happy, thrilled. It just says, go here, do this, say that. It just knows.
Yeah. I love that. Right? Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
So our ego responds then to it. And, we move into our rational mind and go, oh, that's a great idea. Right. Or, ooh, I better check on that. Right. So that's what the intuition does. It gives you the information and then you go act on it. What it's really doing, it's in our, there's a lot of recent research about intuition, but it's throughout our entire brain. It's not just in our unconscious. It's in our conscious and unconscious. It's not just in one side of our brain. It's in both hemispheres of our brain, right? And it has this repository of information and experience that helps it sense patterns and make those decisions. Now, some people like myself, I kind of hinted that I'm a minister. I'm a metaphysical minister. So a lot of people see it, that inner wisdom, as the voice of God within.
Yeah.
Actually, Albert Einstein tended to speak about it in those terms. He was a huge proponent of intuition, just like Steve Jobs was a huge proponent of intuition. They used it all the time, right? But they saw the rational mind as the servant of intuition, not the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, I get the sense that well, just like anything unseen, it doesn't need to be pigeonholed, right? It doesn't need to be pigeonholed as woo-woo or science. It can be both.
Well,
it
can be
because we can't even fully understand it ourselves. It's this piece of us that we learn to be in relationship with.
Well, and we're not in relationship. Most of us are not in relationship with it. And so when we're working on a problem and we haven't done the practice of building the connectivity between the intuitive mind and the rational mind, it's not reliably visible to us because we don't know whether it's intuition or I'm just, fantasizing about something or wishful thinking or what, right?
Exactly.
So we just don't know. We don't recognize it. We don't trust it. And it will show up with some just very bizarre information, like in dreams, and we don't know what to make of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what do you do with that? How do you develop that?
How do you develop it? Oh, glad you asked. There are tools that you can use and practices you can do to begin building the intuitive muscle, is what I call it. It's what we're really doing is we're creating neural pathways that open up to intuitive insight. And certainly, no surprise, I'm sure, mindfulness, meditation, yes. dealing with negative feelings. Now, a lot of people stuff their negative feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then other
Isn't
people.
that called chocolate?
It's called a lot of things. Shopping.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there's endless ways to stuff those temporarily, right?
Yeah.
To stuff those negative feelings. But some people like to really just roll around in them and attach and obsess over them, and they get a little bit of a dopamine hit from that, right?
Yeah, I feel called out. Yeah.
But the best thing to do is to start shifting, because the intuitive mind is creative, it's inventive, it's curious, it's empathetic. The intuitive mind is a very forward-looking, positive characteristic that we have, right? So to shift those negative emotions into saying, what am I learning from this? So a curiosity. So I have people ask questions, where am I headed? How does this align with my values, right? Mm-hmm. When I start doing that and bringing that into meditation and mindfulness, I'm starting to bring forward, without attachment to the answer, what my intuitive mind has to say. Yeah. And another thing that people really, and please share this with your listeners, experiencing trauma, and it doesn't have to be huge trauma. Many, 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 many women, probably the majority, have experienced some form of trauma in their childhood or in their adulthood even. And we've all experienced trauma through what's gone on in the news and with COVID, all of this. Dealing with that trauma is important to open ourselves up to a more aware state, because when we shrink back when we're in trauma, right? There are other ways to do this. Listening to your body. Your body does speak the voice of intuition, right? So there are many ways to do that. The tools that I invite people to use are the meditation practices, mindfulness practices, dream journals. I could remember up to 30 dreams a night. I could be writing all day in a dream journal and not be done. Everyone dreams, right?
Oh yeah, we could do a whole episode just on dreams.
And there are a lot of other tools. They're in the book. I talk about them. I don't mean to derail, but you can tell I'm excited about the whole idea here.
Well, your excitement is contagious, because I think it's intriguing to me to ground the practice of developing intuition in our reality of data and science, and understanding its relationship to our rational mind, and the ego as the servant to intuition. All of that resonates with my practices and what I know. Yeah. And I'm curious how you came to this book. Like how a question I like to ask is, how did you get here? Like, how did you get to the point of being of bringing all that material together? And let's start with that.
Well, I'll tell you one of the reasons that I wrote it is because I feel like leaders in general, women especially, of course, as a woman leader, I'm most passionate about helping other women leaders, especially women leaders who are trying to move forward in a still unbalanced environment. I'll put it that way. But decisions are a real stumbling block for leaders. I mean, we don't really teach leadership. We really teach management. And leadership is about visioning, and it's about motivating, and it's about really helping not just yourself, but all of those who are with you move forward, whether that's in your family or in your community or in your business. So being able to make those decisions very effectively is what this book is about, right? And understanding what gets in our way, what trips us up, but also what moves us forward. I wished I had that when I started my first agency 30-something years ago. And I did start it with an intuitive hit, but I didn't understand how to create that. And I didn't understand how to maintain that and maintain my balance as a leader of an organization using intuition. I now know it, right? And my ministerial studies actually brought that forward in a big, big, big way. But I had what I called a mountaintop moment. I was working for a major organization, hadn't taken a vacation in 5 years. I was working, these ridiculous 80-hour weeks on weekends, all of this stuff. And there was no remote work. So I was in office all the time. So my husband and I, we took our first vacation in 5 years and went to Sedona, Arizona, which is a, beautiful woo-woo space for sure. Whatever you think about the energy vortexes that are there, it is absolutely gorgeous place. And I went up to the airport vortex, climbed up. There were people meditating. I'd never meditated, but I just sat down there and I relaxed because I was moving into that mindfulness state. I didn't know what it was, but that's what I was doing. And I could just see 360 degrees around me of the Red Rock Valley. And it was still and it was silent. It felt like time stopped. And then I heard in my head, it's time to go out on your own. Now, I had been terrified of that thought, although it had occurred to me. But this just very quiet, unemotional, it's time. And so I came down off the mountain literally and started my business within 30 days. And that was the business that won me top 50 entrepreneurs in Atlanta under 50. And, all of the awards and everything that you heard, that was that agency. But it was not easy because I didn't understand how to maintain that flow state.
Yeah. I want to pull something out because you said you came down from the mountain and you started that agency.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people wouldn't have been able to execute. How did you get from that moment of knowing to execution? I mean, yes, there's the knowing, right? Just that in your bones that this is the next right step. But so much can get in the way.
Well, yeah, that 30 days was a pretty in the zone, in the flow. I mean, the hit that I got there sustained me through that 30 days. So what happened when I came back, I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. Now, I will tell you what, my husband was not on board. He was terrified. So I had to do what I did, kind of, I had to fight for it, right? And I named the company the Wow Factory because all the clients at the time were saying, we want that wow, from the agency. And, I went ahead and, branded the business and, I told, my bosses very pleasantly, I'm leaving, and one of them said, bold move. That's now one of my values is boldness. And before I left, they had brought me over $60,000 worth of business before I even opened my doors. So I didn't burn any bridges. And I had work on day one.
Love it.
And so I feel like, when it says it's time, I don't have to go into a panic mode. I don't have to, I mean, certainly getting $60,000 worth of business made my husband okay.
Yeah.
It was, but
it convinced the bystanders.
Totally did, right? But it was a real flow state. Now I quickly got overwhelmed by it and didn't understand the connection between being still, bringing that forward, taking time to reflect. And I really, honestly, I became my own worst boss for probably about 4 or 5 years. We were doubling in revenue every year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Had a tiger by the tail.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of times your minister studies. Tell me about that and what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I knew that something was missing. And, I had joined a friend at it's called a spiritual living center, and it's a church essentially, but it's more of a universal philosophy than I would call it a theology. And it really combines the studies of, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity. It brings the core essence of major shamanism, major world theologies together into one. Mm-hmm. And so it felt like something that I already knew. And mm-hmm. so I leaned into that. And it's called Science of Mind, the branch that it's very close to Unitarian. They're very aligned. They come from the same origins. A lot of people ask me if it is Christian Science. No, but also comes from the same origin, So, but I got my license not through Centers for Spiritual Living, but from the University of Metaphysics in Sedona. So I came full circle. But the idea behind it is that things that you will have heard, Deepak Chopra, Oprah Winfrey, they're using that same ideology. Mm-hmm. In a lot of the work that they're doing, like her Super Soul Sunday uses mm-hmm. a tremendous amount of that. Wayne Dyer, they all came through that same teaching, right? So that change your thinking, change your life ideology is a huge foundation of it. And so it's about how we speak and how we think is actually what's creating our experience in life. And so it's a very take full responsibility for your own well-being, but it also has that idea that there is this universal divine mm-hmm. Of which we are all part of, an expression of, and participating in. I'm not God, but I'm certainly part of God. Yeah.
I love that. It's very aligned with where I am in the women's sanctuary.
Absolutely. Many people are really embracing it. And I don't think it's an idea you can own, right? So I consider myself as a minister just someone who's sharing the information. And, when people want to insert spirituality into their executive work, I'm happy to support them. And otherwise, we meet them where they are. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that because I think it's for those who are ready for something like that, mm-hmm. That's perfect. And then there are others who want to stay squarely in the business world. And yet some of those ideas are essential because we're all human, essential to thriving and succeeding in that world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I personally believe that you can talk about spirituality as much as someone's open to, but everything is spiritual in nature because everything is founded on our beliefs, that's spiritual, and our values, mm-hmm. which is also spiritual. It's just how you want to talk about them.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned talking about taking responsibility for your life. And I know choices is one of the topics you talk about. Talk about the importance of choices and your power of choice in life.
Well, that's a whole session myself.
Yet another podcast.
Well, I'll distill it down to what I think the most important thing to know about choice is. We all have it every moment of the day. And the choice resides with us. Our circumstances are going to happen, right? The relationship with the client goes sideways, or there's a power outage or whatever, right? And there's not enough cash flow at this moment to do this thing that's really important. It just all of these things. But I'm not a victim of those circumstances. I get to participate in those circumstances through my response to them. And again, going back to the intuition, that's where I get to be curious. What's possible here? What can I do given this? And a lot of people will shut down options and say, oh, well, that's not possible. Initially, I invite my clients to list at least 5 or 10 things that are possible, maybe not likely, but possible as choices in order to get their creativity going and get out of the stuck mindset.
Carolyn Mace, I say this all the time, or at least I feel like I say it all the time. Carolyn Mace says, choice is the highest form of creation.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes,
Boom,
it is.
right there.
Yeah.
There.
And I always get to choose again. If I don't care for a choice I've made, I get to re-choose. And one of the biases that I talk about in the book is called, and I didn't make this up, the sunk cost bias. I've invested all this time and all this energy in this relationship or this project or whatever. What do you mean I can just abandon it and do something different? Well, maybe that's, maybe it's time to go out on your own,
I mean, that's important right there. I mean, we're all taught to, stick with it and stick it out, and depends on what the intuition's saying, right? Sometimes that's the correct choice, and sometimes it's
maybe you've learned all you need to learn here. It's all valuable.
It's all valuable. Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another theme that I wanted to pull out was in your blog, you mentioned the difference between confidence and resiliency. Something about how confidence doesn't always equal resiliency.
Well, there's a lot of talk about resiliency right now, and from a
we're all learning it,
right? From a neuroscience standpoint, resiliency is something we can learn, which is also true of confidence. We can learn confidence through experience. The idea with resiliency is that we actually can create it for ourselves by going through something that's stressful. We create, it's like building muscle. And I don't mean something that's like, a trauma producing experience, but getting up and speaking in front of a crowd, or, those kinds of things, which are stressful enough to push us forward or pull us forward, one of the two. We can create resiliency that way. Yeah. The idea behind confidence is I don't need the resilience. I'm already capable of doing it. Right. So a certain amount of confidence will move me forward, and that creates the resiliency.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So the confidence, we'll say that again, the confidence takes you forward, and that builds resilience.
Yes.
So that can build resilience. It is one way of building resilience. It doesn't have to be stress or trauma.
Correct.
Do it.
Correct. Confidence can build resiliency, and resiliency can build confidence. That they're not the same thing, right? I'm not doing this because I'm resilient. I'm doing this and it will create resiliency. But because I have resiliency, I'm able to do more. I'm able to bounce back from adversity.
I see it as an elasticity,
absolutely,
flexibility, adaptability, all of that.
Yeah. And we have this culture that we've created, like, protect people from any kind of disruption or disturbance, or take care of them. They're fragile. We don't want them to, my parents were like, we don't want you to make any mistakes in your life. Parents want that for the kids, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, I made plenty of mistakes, because the more that we get that experience, actually, the less hardship later brings us down. So those that have experienced no hardship, when they hit it, it hits them harder.
Yeah, there's no resiliency to
correct
help them cope.
Correct. Yeah. And so we create confidence in our kids, and in ourselves, obviously, by not, how do I put this? Complimenting, reinforcing someone for something that is innately theirs. For example, you're so smart, you're so beautiful. That's not as helpful as praising. That's the word I'm looking for. Praising someone for their effort. Wow, you really worked hard on that. See the difference? The process, the progress, the leaning into it. That's what actually builds confidence, because if if I'm relying on my beauty or my innate intelligence to do something, then the minute I hit an obstacle, I don't have anything in my toolkit to pull on to build that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's why I think it's important to praise women leaders for their power and their insight and their empathy and these things which we create, than it is to praise her for being, so smart or so beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Women leaders need to know that they have the power to create their own confidence and their own resiliency.
Absolutely. I mean, and yeah, they need to hear it particularly, but we all need to hear it because we just probably don't hear it enough, right?
Correct. We have a culture that doesn't understand that the innate abilities, they're there. That's wonderful. But that we need to teach process and practice far more.
Mm. And so
it's not the test that you memorize the answers on. Words, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And so intuition feeds that, right? It feeds our process and gives us direction for it.
It's right in there with it, because they did a really powerful study on grade school children whom they taught intuitive skills to. Actually did it using riddles, but so they then traced those kids into adulthood. And what they found is because they had those intuitive abilities, which is process oriented, practice oriented, they were better at problem solving. They had less aggression and anger. They were more socially engaged, better relationships, and they grew their professional success faster and further than their control group. That's the power of intuition, right? It's not just, hey, let me make a better decision. It's let me have a better life.
Absolutely. It comes down to that. It absolutely does create results. I hear you. What I hear in that is this level of self-awareness.
Correct.
That gives you this kind of inner true north about how to be you.
Right. Yeah. In spiritual circles, they call it consciousness. In executive circles, in C-suite circles, they want to call it self-awareness. They're essentially the same thing. I need to know who I am, what I'm good at, what my skills are, what my strengths, my weaknesses, what I stand for, what I care about. I need to know. And we have a culture that doesn't teach that. So I'm passionate about teaching that.
I love that. And thankfully, you and with many others, that's beginning to shift, right? The whole conversation is beginning to shift towards that.
I think it is. And I'll tell you, I kind of closed the book with this, and it kind of, it's thrown some people for a loop. It might be what my next book needs to be about, but artificial intelligence, people are scared of it. It's one of the fastest growing technologies. I mean, it's just on this vertical climb. I mean, it's here. Right. It's not going anywhere, everybody. Right? What it's doing, though, is not necessarily putting people out of jobs. I mean, it might initially in some very basic ways, but ultimately what it's doing is it's transforming the kind of work that we as human beings do. It cannot reproduce the intuitive and unconscious mind processes.
Right.
And so therefore, our work becomes more creative, more innovative, more visionary as a species because of artificial intelligence, which can do the rational work. So the rational work is not where we need to be focusing.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's freeing us up to do more of that visioning.
Which is the majority of our mind anyway. Isn't that interesting? Right? So artificial intelligence is only representing this little piece of our brain.
Oh, well, that's great because I mean, I love the picture of putting AI in a place where it's useful and helpful and not threatening, right? or that we are still in control.
Right. We have to be visionary enough, practice oriented enough, conscious or self-aware enough in order to be able to capture that.
Wanted to pull out one more piece, and you said something about the intuition pulling us. Can you say more about that? Because it's a different, it's a different, it's a different feeling than maybe the way we're directed by something else.
Mm. Well, it definitely is within,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and a lot of folks that I've talked to, they get intuitive hits, but they're usually protective intuitive hits, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think I left you know, the oven on or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or I'm afraid I'm going to lose something, right?
Mm.
What, and you get that kind of like prickle, like maybe I should go back and reread that document or something, right? So a lot of people experience intuition in a protective sense. What really is also going on is intuition is about forward movement.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about going back and fixing something. It's not about protect and defend. It's about the momentum that moves us into our own personal growth and evolution, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's a lot of research studies about that, but that's what seems to be coming forward, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I say it pulls us, because it's pulling us forward into our lives.
Yeah. I love that. It's the opposite of being pushed, right? Being pushed
Correct.
towards something that
Yeah.
by something that may not really be you, either outside of you or a voice inside of you pushing you towards something which is not actually
Correct.
aligned. But
Right.
I can feel this sense of the intuition pulling you. It's almost like you coming back from Sedona, like it wasn't, you weren't being forced to do it. You were absolutely, you said you were buoyed by
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
experience to just do it.
Well, and it helped me overcome my fear as
Mm-hmm.
well. And, often I get from audiences when I'm talking about intuition, I get one or two questions. I don't know how to recognize and trust it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is, what do I do with the fear?
Well, let's talk about that. What do you do with the
Mm.
fear?
Well, the fear is our ego.
Mm-hmm.
If intuition says start a business and you're like, I don't know how to do that. That sounds really scary. Where's the money going to come from? Which is basically what my husband was saying. Um, then what we've done is we've shifted out of intuition and into ego,
Mm-hmm.
into the rational mind. And the ego is also about protecting us, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just wants us to be safe.
Yeah.
That's all. And our egos can get damaged. I mean, it's really just our personality. If we didn't have an ego, because it gets a bad rap, right? Our ego is the villain. No, it's really not. And without our ego, we wouldn't even have a personality. We'd be like lobotomized, truly. So the ego's fine, but when I recognize that I'm experiencing some kind of fear in response to awareness, which is really what intuition is, awareness, right? Then I get to say, wait a minute, let's play a game. Let's get curious. Let's explore not just what could go wrong. And one of the questions that I have people ask to tap their intuition is, what are the obstacles that are possible here, right? Well, what could go wrong? That's okay. We need to look at that, because I can't get resiliency if I'm all bogged down in what's not working. So I build resiliency past the fear by acknowledging what could go wrong, but then also looking at what could go right and moving towards what could go right and being willing to go around or over the obstacles, a bit like water. That's why I like the term flow. So that I can still follow my intuition and feel like I'm not exposing myself unnecessarily.
I love water is such a great metaphor for that. And flowing with it and around the obstacles, you have to see the obstacle to get around it. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do feel like, unfortunately, because so many women are starting businesses right now, and I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years, and I see a lot of women starting businesses right now on a wing and a prayer. And ladies, if you're listening to this and you're one of the ones that's like, I'm following my bliss, I want to follow my joy, I want to do my thing, if you build it, they will come. I'm here to tell you, you need a plan B. It doesn't have to be a plan B of going back to corporate or whatever, but you need a plan B, because businesses without a plan and a strategy are going to fail at about 80%. About 80% of the businesses don't have a strategy, and about 80% of them fail. I think there's a correlation there. And so do what you love, but do it by being realistic about what the possible pitfalls are and making sure that you have a safety net built in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The intuition will bring the dream, but somebody's got to execute it, right? In the 3D world with a plan and a strategy.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that's just the nature of the beast. That's putting the rational, as Einstein called it, the servant of intuition, putting the rational mind into service for what the intuition is encouraging you to do. You don't go all in on intuition and think it's just going to carry you. You are responsible for taking the action and owning the choice and the decision that you're making to follow it.
Absolutely. There's been such a tidal wave in the last couple of decades of this idea of following that intuition as a career path. Right. The intuition is the career path, right? It is you go into the healing arts and you use your intuition in whatever field you serve people.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but it's a tool. It's not the path. It's a tool on the path for whatever field. And I love that you're helping entrepreneurs, and particularly women, not only make that distinction, but then continue, build that skill, that inner skill of continuing to use that in service to, whatever their work is in the world.
Yeah. And it breaks my heart that so many of these folks who are starting new businesses are feeling uncertain. They're feeling a little bit like an imposter, which is, entrepreneurs, about 87% of entrepreneurs experience imposter syndrome. First, only different. That's the ones that are most likely to experience it. And they start looking for someone, and I was totally guilty of this when I started my agency, looking for someone to add credibility and validity to what they're doing. And that's all of these folks that are out there on Facebook, like, I've got the answer, it's funnels. I've got the answer, it's LinkedIn. I've got the answer, it's and they don't have the answer. And approach it with eyes open. You may be able to learn something there, but it's not necessarily your answer. And that's where I really want people to lean more into their intuition and their inner guidance and learn to trust themselves.
So would you say that intuition is kind of an antidote to the imposter syndrome?
It's part of it. There are a number of things that you can do to overcome imposter syndrome. And one of the first ones is to recognize that you didn't create your own imposter syndrome. It's baked into our culture. For any underrepresented community, they found it first in women, but it's not just women. And it's this feeling like I don't have enough credentials. It's not perfect enough, and they'll burn themselves out doing this. And that you see that a lot in entrepreneurs, just complete burnout, trying to do more, better, faster than anybody else because they feel like they are kind of faking it.
So maybe they're being pushed by it instead of being pulled by the intuition.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have a degree in mathematics, and in the math department, I think it was my junior year there, one of the professors, I mean, this was theoretical mathematics, infinite infinities, like crazy stuff, right? And the professor said to myself and the one other female in a class of 15, women don't belong in the math department. This was 1990.
Oh my goodness.
And, that's the kind of stuff that you just hear this and you feel like, I got to try harder. Right. and you report them to the university, and the university does nothing. And by the way, now he's the dean of the department. You know, what are you gonna do? You know, stop putting it on yourself, because it's not. It's the culture.
Yeah. And so, what do we do? How do we work with the imposter syndrome?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's that self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I do have enough credentials. I am an expert in this area. I do know what I'm talking about, and I don't have to make it perfect. I just need to do the next right thing. Mm-hmm. Helping others, talking about your feelings in safe space, mm-hmm. Learning to speak up. There are a tremendous number of things that we can do to overcome imposter syndrome. On my website, I actually have an imposter syndrome workbook that your listeners may want to check out. And so you can find that at staceyruthsays.com/imposter syndrome workbook. And it's super helpful.
Great. Yeah, we'll reference mm-hmm. that in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, I don't know that any of us ever stopped doing that work with the imposter syndrome.
Well, one thing that is very important to differentiate is that it's not just self-doubt. We all experience self-doubt. Anytime we try something new or we're growing, we're going to experience that discomfort of self-doubt. Imposter syndrome becomes debilitating. And if a leader of a team or an organization has it, they tend to infect the organization with it. And so it's really important to weed it out in the individual leaders and also in the organization as well. That's why it's a cultural thing.
And that's something you do.
Something I do.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us about your work with executives.
Well, it's funny because, I work with men and women. My focus, my passion, and my specialty is helping women leaders, especially those that are moving from one level to the next. They may be starting a business. They may be really trying to ramp up their promotion and their visibility within a larger organization. And what's been working at, level A isn't going to take them to level B, or they've just been promoted and they're like, okay, wait, this isn't the same game I was winning at, at this other level. Yeah. So I really help them move through that with, decisions, dealing with, oh my gosh, office politics. And now, isolation. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people are struggling with the isolation. They're feeling out of the loop. And then you've got all of this interpersonal dynamic going on and understanding how to navigate that, and also be able to manage the teams as a leader rather than as a manager. Because if you're managing and the team gets bigger, you're going to be overwhelmed fast. Burnout is a big one right now too.
That's great work. That's great work. So this has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
If our listeners want to get in touch, maybe for some coaching or to ask a question about intuition or anything, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I welcome just conversations and getting to know where your listeners are at. Absolutely. And I do want to say that if people have a particular situation they think might be helped by coaching, or that it might help their organization, reach out. I am more than happy to devote, a 30-minute call to a particular situation to help them assess whether it's a good fit or not. So they can reach me at staceyruthsays.com, and that's STACEYRUTHSAYS.com. There's a contact form in there. That's probably the easiest thing to do. And I'm all over social media, Stacey Ruth Says.
Perfect. And your book, Inside Out Smart,
comes out April 19th. Yay. I'm excited.
I cannot wait. Cannot wait to see it and read it.
I am so excited for this one. This is it's a labor of love. So I'm really looking forward to it. You'll get some of my juicy secrets in there too, some of the stories that got me where I am. I think the ladies will relate.
Excellent. Excellent. Oh, well, Stacey, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so grateful you joined us today, and
A joy.
it really was. So we will have another guest here shortly, soon. So stay tuned for that. If you like these podcasts, please like and share, and but you can find more of them on your favorite podcast media. The Women's Sanctuary podcast is brought to you by the Women's Sanctuary, offering sisterhood and counseling and coaching for women in transition and revolutionary women. Thank you again, Stacey, for being here with me. This is Arlia Hoffman, and this has been the Women's Sanctuary. We'll see you again next time.